Hey everybody, I'm John. This is the Midnight Paint and Body channel. In this video we're going to take the 70 Charger that I painted in my one-of-a-kind, state-of-the-art homemade paint booth and turn it into a show car finish. So if you didn't see the last video where I finally painted this 70 Charger RTSE that I've been working on for about a year and a half, here it is. It's all painted. I have just moved it back into the paint booth just because my lighting's better in here for polishing. So it did turn out really nice. I'm happy with the finish. I'm, overall really happy with it. But painting in a homemade paint booth like I do, I always end up with a little bit of dust and stuff in the paint. The worst is right here where I got some moisture through the gun, so hopefully we're going to be able to get rid of that. But overall, what we're going to be doing is sanding this all with several different grades of wet sanding paper and then polishing with 3M polishing compound. So we're going to be bringing it up to a completely glass-like finish. So as you can see, that's, there isn't much texture in my finish, a little bit. So I am happy with the way the clear went on, but we're going to perfect that even further with the polishing process. Now, as always, my disclaimer, I'm no expert at this. I can do it. Maybe my techniques aren't the best way, I don't know. I just do what I know works for me. So that is my disclaimer. So I'm going to grab some materials here, guys, and I will show you what we're starting with. So I'll show you guys what I'm starting out with here. So what I have here is some wet sandpaper. So I have got here 1200, 1500, 2000, 2500, and 3000 grit. I'm going to be using all of these. Now, I'm only using the 1200, which is fairly coarse because I am going to have to take out quite a bit here. If it wasn't for those spots, I would probably start with 1500. But I'm going to start taking those down a bit. Now, a few basic tools. I have just a regular sanding block, and then this is actually just a piece of packaging foam. I always use these just for kind of getting into some of these contours where we don't want that sharp edge of the block. There's probably specific blocks and stuff you can buy for this. Pretty low budget operation around here. So I just use what I have. I make stuff work. So I'm going to start with some 1200 grit. Now you want your sandpaper and your panel good and wet. I'm just going to be dunking it in some clean water, and I always use just a spray bottle just with clean water in it. Now you want your surface to be super clean before you start. If you feel any grit at all when you're sanding, stop and clean it, because any little piece of anything that can get in there is going to put deeper scratches than you want in that panel. So I'm going to start here, just taking some of this stuff out. Hopefully it's going to come out. It was some moisture came through the gun, so it's probably kind of deep. We're only worried to around here on the panel. This car is getting the black vinyl top, so it's going to come down to somewhere here. So up into the sail panel doesn't matter. As you can see, the finish is kind of crappy on it. I got a big dry spot there, but it doesn't matter. So I'm going to start sanding. So I'm going to bring you guys in here just for a look so you kind of get an idea what we're shooting for. So now you can see that I've sanded this area. So I'm trying to hold the light with one hand and the camera with the other. So just for an example, if you can see, there is a little dust nib there. So I haven't completely sanded that off, so I'm going to need to take that one down a little more. Actually, you can probably see better back here. So you can see I've got this nice smooth surface, and then where I haven't finished sanding, there's some little dust nibs still. Here's where that moisture was. I still need to go down just a little more with that. But at this point, so I've done this with 1200 grit. Now I'm going to switch to a 1500 grit, and then the 2500 grit, and then the 3000 grit. You don't want to, it's like prepping. You don't want to change your grits by too much. So we're going to finish with 3000, so it's going to take a lot less to polish. But if I was to go from this 1200 to 3000, it's not going to get these deep scratches out. So that's why you want to progress through the slightly different grits. And, you know, with starting off with a reasonably nice finish like this, where there wasn't a lot of texture, it doesn't take a whole lot of sanding. Now, if you got something with a heavy texture, a heavy orange peel, I mean, you can sand until that's flat and polish it. Now, obviously, you need to be super careful with your sanding and your polishing around these edges. Keep it really flat. You don't want to, I mean, you sand through on this edge, or if I polish through on this edge, I'm redoing this panel. So we don't want to do that. So I'm going to continue with some sanding. I'm going to just finish up. I'm going to lightly do all of this with the 1200, and then I'm going to start switching grits. Not going to keep the camera on for a whole lot, but I'll periodically bring you guys back to kind of see how it looks when it's sanded smooth. And then maybe what we'll do is typically I would like to sand all of this before I start polishing. But I think what I'll do is I'll sand this quarter panel and we'll polish it up so I can show you guys kind of what I do and how it's going to look. Well, it's been a few days, but back on the Charger. So I have got this side of the car all wet sanded. So like I kind of explained at the beginning, I think, so I went from 1200 grit and changed grits right down to 3000 grit. Now, you don't want to skip those steps. It's quite important. And so I'll just kind of show you what we're left with. So, you know, we've basically sanded out any texture in the paint and any dust nibs or anything like that. Sometimes you'll do this and polish it and realize you've got maybe a couple little spots that you want to just sand a little bit more. But you don't want to sand too far, though. I mean, it's nice to sand and sand and sand until you're perfect and flat, and then you hit it with a polisher and you burn through. So I swear that compressor comes on every time I turn the camera on. Anyway, so I've got it all sanded. So, like I've said before, edges, super careful. Now actually you can see these edges are still shiny because I just kind of sanded up to them that way and that way. And it'll be the same thing with the polisher. I'm going to keep the polisher nice and flat. You know, we're definitely not going to angle onto those edges because you'll burn through pretty quick on those. Now, there is a lot of material on here. There is 3 heavy coats of clear on this car, so I do have a lot to work with, but you still want to be cautious. I mean, you burn through, you're starting over, repainting the panel or panels, and then sanding and polishing all over again. So you don't want to make more work for yourself. So I'm going to set up here, guys. I'll get my polisher out and I'll kind of take you guys through it a little bit. I'll show you what I have, what I use. Again, keep in mind, for any low budget operation, I don't have any fancy equipment, but I guess I have stuff that most of you guys would have or would get if you're going to be doing something like this. So, oh, there we go. I'll set up and I'll see you in a minute. Oh, actually just thought there, guys, while I was heading over to get the polisher, just thought I'd show you. Customer brought out some more pieces yesterday. So I've got a bunch of new parts, some lights and lenses and bumpers, and look at this stuff. This is all the QA1 4-link for the rear. So, man, this is beautiful stuff. You know, pretty much all bolt in. You know, I have welded in the braces and stuff into the chassis that it's going to need. The rear differential, I still need to sandblast it and paint it, but it's got some tabs that needed to be welded to the axle housing for this stuff. But initially I wasn't going to do this part of it, but like I said to him as well, it'd be nice to get this thing back on its wheels before I start adding more weight to the car. If I'm going to be putting on bumpers and, you know, windows and stuff like that, that body is just going to get heavier and heavier. Yeah, I would just really like to have it sitting on its wheels. So realistically, I think at this point, bolting this stuff in is pretty straightforward. Now, I'm no chassis suspension guy, I'm a body man, but I mean, I did that. If you watch my past videos, I did that 4-link in that Chevy too. Also a TCI, or that was a TCI kit, this is QA1. But it was pretty much bolt in, and also beautiful stuff, like it was incredible. So anyway, I figured this would be the last video on this car doing the polishing, but I think we'll be coming back doing this stuff later. But yeah, let's get polishing. So I'll kind of show you guys what I use. So I have an inexpensive Canadian Tire polisher. Now, I honestly like these polishers. I recently bought a better one, still a fairly inexpensive one, but I go through about one of these a year, roughly. I typically burn them out, but it doesn't matter, it's like 140 bucks. So last time I burnt one out, I bought one a few steps up, it was a couple $100, but I just didn't like it. It wouldn't go slow, it didn't have a real slow setting on it. I ended up returning it and going back to one of these cheap ones because they're quite good. So these are just a Velcro pad. Some guys have a preference of wool pads. I like these foam pads. So this is a polishing pad, or like a compounding pad. And then you step down to a finer pad and different polish after you get through this compounding part, but we're not going to be doing that. I typically don't do that until the end when the whole car is polished. I always use this 3M compound, so 36060. So this is the first step. You're going to be hitting the car with this. In a lot of cases, I find I polish them with this and this pad, and it's done. It depends on the car, obviously, not stuff like this, but even if it's the average pickup truck that I work on, it's just fine. So I will step down to a fine pad and the number 3 polish when I finish. This is number 1. So this stuff is quite pricey. This cost me about 80 bucks for one of these, and I go through them pretty quick because I polish a fair bit. But I'll just kind of show you guys. I'm going to start on, maybe I'll just kind of start right here where I think you can see best. I know my lighting's not the best, but like I said, low buck operation. Heck, I'm still using this used GoPro that I bought back when I started the YouTube channel. But anyway, a little bit of compound. You can put it on the car or on the pad, whatever you want. So, I put my ear mufflers on. You notice I wear these all the time. Almost 35 years in this trade, unfortunately. My ears have, well, it's taken its toll on my hearing, but I try and protect what's left. So, start really slow, light, even pressure. I like these polishers because they have this thumb control. So I can adjust the speed on the fly. Nice and flat, nice and even. I don't want to stay in one spot too long. I don't want to freeze all that heat. Clean microfiber towel. Now, be very sure these are clean. Be careful where you put it down. You get a little bit of grit in this when you're wiping the car down. You'll be starting over. All right, well, I think I'm blocking the light here a little bit. Hopefully that works for you guys can kind of see. So there's our sanded surface. And then there's our polished surface. So as you can see, that doesn't take much at all. Now this is, you know, darn near perfect show car finish. So that's all there is to it. You just take your time and do all those steps. This is not really that hard to do. Now, obviously, it'd be nice if you've got a super clean environment for doing this, so you're not picking up any grit and dust and getting dust on the car. I don't have that luxury, but I'm just super careful. I probably will be moving this car back into the paint booth because I'm not going to need it for a little bit. I like to do the polishing in there when I can, just because it's cleaner, better light. But something to keep in mind too, I will do the polishing in there with this compound. But when I get to the number 3 polish, like a finishing glaze, I'm not sure what they call it, it's got a lot of contaminants in it, so it'll contaminate my paint booth. So I definitely won't do it in there. So anyway, I'm going to carry on polishing. Now, you'll see, I don't bother to wet sand down here, the really low areas. I mean, let's be honest, the finish is nice on this car. Once this thing is sitting on the ground on its suspension, yeah, it's just, I mean, you can, but I just don't think it's necessary because it is just fine down there. If I did see a big dust chunk or something, then I would sand it out and polish it. But for the most part, I don't find it necessary to do every lower surface with the polisher. So I'll set up the camera a little bit, time lapse a little. I'm going to carry on this quarter panel and we'll have a look when it is shiny. but I'm not going to do any of that basically until I've done the whole car, hood and deck lid. I'm going to polish them and get them installed, but I like to just use a little bit of quick detailer just to kind of clean everything up, gets rid of any last little bits of polish residue, just for now. So you can see why I like to keep these masked up as long as possible. It just keeps all that polish and stuff from blowing all over everything. Not that it really matters. I mean, the interior is going to be completely covered once it's all put in, but still, it just keeps things a little neater and tidier, I find. Well, now here's one side of the car all polished. So I don't know if you can tell in the camera just how good this looks, but the finish is, I've got a light on it here, that helps, but the finish is really nice. I'm super happy with that. It still needs to be glazed, so that'll bring the shine up a lot more too. But I won't do that until I've got the other side all wet sanded and polished, the hood and deck lid, and I'll get those on and I'll glaze the entire car at once. So I think I am going to end this video here. I was going to keep it going until I had everything done and show it to you completely polished. But I thought I was done with this car, but now, as I showed you earlier, I've got all that 4-link suspension and I do have some assembly to do on it. I think I'll just hang tough. I'll bring you guys along for that 4-link and the rear differential. We'll do that little bit of assembly on it. And when you see it next, it should be completely polished out and somewhat assembled, the body anyway, hood, deck lid. So, and I mentioned along the way there, guys, I was mentioning that I do this all with inexpensive tools. Like I said, I've got a cheap polisher or whatever. Now, I'm not saying just go out and use cheap tools. I mean, if you have a budget for high-end tools, that's great. I mean, if I did, I would probably have a much better polisher than I have, but the reality is I'm a self-employed body man. There isn't a whole lot of budget for upgrading the tools, unfortunately, but I make do with what I have. So, as always, guys, thank you for watching. If you haven't already, you could subscribe if you wanted to. If you don't want to, then don't. It's all good. But, as always, I do hope you come back and check out the next video.